I'd like now, in just a moment, to have an open discussion for about 15 minutes between the members of the panel. Then we'll have about 10, 15 minutes to take some questions from the audience, and a few other distinguished members who've been part of this 9/11 meeting that we've had will also be able to say a few words. I just want to state on the record that if you look at one of the smoking guns of 9/11 is the supposed hijackers working for the U.S. government, being involved, living at bases. We have the Pensacola News-Journal, MSNBC, reporting that at least 3 of them were training in a secret program at the Pensacola Naval Air Station. That's admitted, hidden in plain view. Then the dean of the Defense Language School, the head of the school, it was in the major Californian papers and even in the Associated Press. It was first published in the San Jose Mercury News. He went public with the headline that the government was behind the attacks. And I even called and talked to him, but he wouldn't go on the radio show. They were talking about court-martialing him, but they dropped that. Why did he say this? Well, buried in the article it was that 3 of the hijackers were trained in high-level spy training at the Defense Language School here in California. Then we have FBI informants living with some of the hijackers, living next door to them, giving them money. And then when other FBI agents in Miami, in Chicago, in Minneapolis, St. Paul, in Phoenix, picked up all this chatter that they have these patsies out creating this history so they could then use them later, they were told, back off, shut up, you're off the case. That's on record too. There's hundreds of these points that are all on record. And remember, the government tells us, elements of the government tell us that the terrorists attacked us because they hate our freedom. Well, then why is the government taking all of our freedom? To make the terrorists happy? But these globalists, they love to have little word games, little tricks, little things hidden in plain view. You see, it's true. The terrorists really did attack us to take our freedom and to seize the United States as an engine of global government. One of the main reasons we're having this event, I should have said it earlier, so I'll say it now, is to stop a new 9/11. Every time there's a new terrorist attack, every time there's some new event, the approval ratings for this police state go up, and then they drop down again. And on every front, the neocons and their handlers and the other networks that are out there that work with them are in trouble. The jig is up, the people are waking up, and it's very, very exciting. Let's go ahead and start with Dr. Bob Bowman. Bob, why don't you just start this off, and let's all just go back and forth here and have a discussion about strategies, where we go from here, how we expose this.
We are exposing it. The old story, the problem with this country is ignorance and apathy. And one guy turns to the other and says, "Do you believe that?" And the other guy says, "I don't know and I don't care." How do we end the ignorance and apathy? Well, I'll tell a story tonight in my speech about a couple of people I met on the flight out here and how I turned them around. And the answer to how we get rid of this ignorance and apathy is one person at a time. But we have to speak up. We have to raise our voices. We have to speak truth to power. We can't just sit back and let somebody else do it. We can't just sit back and say, well, Alex is doing it on his radio show. I don't have to do anything. Because a lot of the times it's us who are listening to Alex. We need to go out to those people who haven't heard him, and we need to tell them the truth. We need to convince them that they don't really know the truth and that they should. We need to stir the pot. We need to create a dissonance in their belief system so that finally it will waken them up. And we can do it, and we will do it, and we, for goodness sakes, are for sure going to do it when I get up there in Congress and really raise some hell. Thank you.
I have a question I'd like to address to Webster Tarpley. Being here at the hotel, I've talked to wait staff, people in the bar. I've talked to people that work at the hotel. I'd say about 30% of those, just here at this hotel that we randomly picked in L.A., I'm from Austin, Texas, are already aware of my work, your work, of what's happening. And then others that I've talked to don't attack me. They go, yeah, I've always had a suspicion. And that's a microcosm of the polls, the Zogby polls, the CNN polls of 90% believing there's a cover-up, 83% another CNN poll. Everywhere I go, the talk radio interviews I do on even shows that are adversarial, that are coming after me, the host is attacking me, but almost every caller calls in agreeing that at least there's a cover-up, something's wrong, they've seen all these lies. And I would say the majority of those believe it's an inside job. Do you think that, you'll speak to that? And then also, I'd like to get your take on how this is affecting the establishment. You've studied these rogue networks, the shadow government. I've seen a lot of their confidence in the last year or so evaporate. They're not as arrogant now. Can you speak to that?
Alex, I think the dams are breaking. As Charlie Sheen said, the worm is turning. The myth is collapsing. Mm-hmm. The shock effect is wearing off. Human reason is reasserting itself. We see a lot of fake terrorist events now orchestrated with very little basis. We see London, 250 people in a SWAT team shoot a guy. You can't find the cyanide and the sarin gas they came to get. Toronto, 17 patsies arrested. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police had delivered fertilizer to their house and said that was a bomb.
Same thing in Florida.
If Sergeant Preston of the Yukon with Yukon King the Wonder Dog comes and delivers 10 tons of fertilizer to your house and says, you want a lifetime supply, don't sign for it. You'll be taken into custody. And then we've just had, I think, a really pathetic group of patsies rounded up in Florida, the Haiti group. I think all of that is that the myth is collapsing. Now, what do we need? This movement of ours, I think, is in the process of going from maybe 5,000 full-time activists towards, I hope, something more like about 5 million. In the process, the main barrier are the left gatekeepers. Noam Chomsky, Amy Goodman, Air America, most of them. The Nation magazine, the left liberal intelligentsia, the biggest barrier. They have obsessively parroted the racist, warmongering official version. They've slandered people like us who try to fight against it. These people have got to be discredited. They've got to be gone around. Now, I think we've...
Well, Webster, in all fairness, I have seen them softening. I have seen them more coming over to the reality.
They better soften really fast.
Professor Jones had a comment.
If I just can, we need the impeachment of Bush Cheney, but the first item has got to be misprision of treason. In other words, 9/11 crimes have to be the first item. The other impeachment doesn't go anywhere.
All right.
The other question then is, if the ruling elite try to impose martial law and a wider war, calling off elections, let's do what the people did in Madrid back in Spain, back in the spring of 2004.
3/11.
About a third to a half of the Spanish population went into the streets for an open-ended general strike. If they take your liberties in the Constitution,
thank you, Webster Tarpley. I agree.
Strike to get them back.
We've got to be ready if there's another false flag to look at the evidence immediately. If it shows that it's these crime networks doing it, exposing them. Professor Stephen Jones?
Yeah, I wanted to tell a little story, true story. So I called my car mechanic up, about my car, work on my car. And he says, I said, no, how are things? And he said, he said about this 9/11, I got out of the blue. And he said, the Pentagon released these tapes that supposedly show my car mechanic, supposedly show airline 77, American 77, going into the Pentagon. So he said, so I looked at these tapes because, he'd read, he said, I heard about what you're talking about. So I perked up my ears and I looked at those tapes and he said, I couldn't see any planes. I don't know what they're doing to us, but now he said, so I said, yeah, well, how about my car? He says, but wait a minute. Did you know that the FBI, right after this Pentagon crash, they went over and seized, within minutes, they seized from a gas station there, they seized the surveillance tape, and they went to a hotel and they seized the surveillance tapes. I said, yeah, I knew about that. It's kind of curious. He said, curious? It's bizarre. I want those tapes, And I just had to say, well, I agree with you. I'd sure like to get this information, and not just those tapes, but all these photographs and videos that NIST has obtained. We'd like to get a hold of those. There's a petition that we have on our Scholars for 9/11 Truth site requesting, is probably not the right term, demanding release of information. Why are we being... You talk about a cover-up and people becoming aware that there has been a cover-up. I see this all around, people telling me, I just want to find out what happened. Well, that's what we're about, and spreading the word, getting people aware, and I keep coming back to the Constitution because it does have remedies. It was designed with checks and balances to prevent one branch, like the executive or the judicial, from getting too much power. It was designed to contain just that problem. And I think it's high time that we get back to the Constitution and exercise constitutional remedies.
Thank you, Professor. I want to get a comment from Professor Festzer, but I would just add, I forgot. I get here, I see two LAPD cops. They both know who I am. They tell me they're fans. There's some off-duty police here. I talk to them. There's some even bodyguards here. I talk to them. Oh, yeah, we all know. Oh, yeah, we all know it's an inside job. Sure, we're not stupid, especially investigators. A lot of these are like, veteran detectives and people that I'm here talking to. They know. I mean, if you have basic, rudimentary skills in investigation, you know the official story is a fraud. Jim Festzer?
The mass media in the United States is controlled by 5 corporations with respect to about 90% of what we hear and read. Our last bastions of freedom of speech and inquiry are the Internet, talk radio, and thank God for what remains of public television, C-SPAN, and radio. The nation's leading newspaper has disgraced itself by its utter failure to come to grips with the obvious and overwhelming evidence that what happened in its own city, a few blocks from its own headquarters, killing 3,000 of its own citizens, was a crime committed by the United States government. And if these people are too stupid or too ignorant to put together 2 plus 2, and understand what that means, let them at least confront the fact that an egregious crime was committed by the Environmental Protection Agency as that vast cloud of toxic dust welled through the streets of Manhattan, bringing death and destruction to thousands on a delayed basis. I've had first responders call me. They could barely get a breath out, telling how their lungs were coated with this stuff, microparticles of concrete, residue of thermate, heavy metals from computers that were absolutely decimated, the asbestos with which that building was laden. They are dying. Christy Whitman of the EPA assured them then that it was safe to breathe that dust. If the New York Times can confront no other aspect of this issue, by God, let them confront that one.
I want to just go down the line briefly because I've interviewed many of you on talk radio, many of you personally for documentaries. But we've talked, Professor Jones, and it's in my new film that we're just about to release, Terror Storm. I mean, you've come right out that clearly from the evidence, the research you've done, it proves the official story is a fraud. Can you, for people here, restate your inside job statement? And then I would like to get the take of the other panelists here on their view. I mean, if they're ready to come out and state that this is clearly an inside job. Professor Jones?
Sure. So the evidence that I started with, Alex, on that, the molten metal pools indicate, in this case, a large amount of incendiary or explosive material. Super thermite is explosive. Ordinary thermite and thermate are incendiaries. So there's an enormous quantity then, and you see the effects of the explosives. You see these plumes of debris coming out, and I hope people will look online, for instance, at WTC7.net, Scholars for 9/11 Truth. You can get your hands on these data quite easily now because of the Internet, still freely available, I'm pleased to say. The point is, planting these explosives and incendiaries requires a group of people. It requires pre-planning. That this implies an inside job. It doesn't have to be a large group of people. And indeed, I suspect it was a small group of people, perhaps about 19, who were actually in the know. You see what I'm saying? And then there were others below them who were basically, you put this material, we put it in the elevator shafts and so on. They give them instructions.
In fact, you've done a calculation on how many men it would take, how many trips to load the buildings with the explosives?
Yeah, let's see. So in my paper, I interviewed a demolition expert on this. How much explosives does it take to bring down a tower like this? And he said, well, he's done hundreds. Southwark towers took 200 or 300 pounds of explosives. Well, that means if you scale that to the towers, you're talking about 1,000 pounds, roughly. In the towers case, it does look like they put more for redundancy, for example. For instance, you don't know where the plane's going to go in, but you want to start the explosions where the plane went in, so you have to have extra explosives at different levels. Are you following me here? Different levels. So then with a radio control, you say, and computerized, after about an hour, we're ready now. Computer controls will start near where the planes went in, and we'll just knock the material out of the way, so this will be a complete straight-down collapse. In fact, I asked him, that covers the number. There's a number of things I asked him. What happens, I asked him, if you do some explosions, you set your explosives, and some of them go off, but something happens, and it doesn't keep the sequence of explosions. What happens? He says,
Many times in official controlled demolitions,
right.
It fails. It doesn't bring the building down. So they will normally do an even higher load
right.
to ensure that happens. Also, the Tower 1 and 2 were top-down demolitions from all
right.
the evidence and what scientists and demolition experts and Kevin Ryan of Underwriting Laboratories went public and they did internal studies. It just was impossible with the official story.
Yeah.
But 7 was the classic controlled demolition with the central column being blown. We have the squib blast points on video and the building falls in perfectly on its footprint. And I've talked to people that work as engineers at the highest levels of different controlled demolition companies, and they say that was one of the most beautiful jobs. Most controlled demolition companies, it's sad, but it's true. Most controlled demolition companies that do this cannot do it that good. This was what I've been told is it was a work of art in the industry.
That's right. Yeah, collapsing straight down onto its footprint. Folks who haven't seen the collapse of Building 7, you really need to look at it, how it comes straight down. I have my students time it. I have shown that. It's an example of free fall, as we talk about Newton's laws.
Newtonian physics there.
You betcha. and we time it, click, and it comes down. You look at the corner, so things happen, but you start where the corner, when it starts to move and begins its steady descent, 6.5 seconds, plus or minus 0.2. And then you look at free fall. If you dropped an apple, Newton's apple, you see, off the corner, it would take 6.0 seconds. So it's just a little. And then we look at other controlled demolitions. We know they're controlled demolitions. Same thing. It's just slightly behind free fall. Now, how can it fall so fast?
Well, we also know with real-world laboratory events that we can use as experiments, no modern steel buildings ever collapse from fire. We've had the Madrid fire almost 2 days, 100-foot white-hot flames shooting out, and the building was gutted, but even aluminum desks were sitting there and hadn't melted, and none of the major steel beams even got weakened. This happens over and over and over again, but magically on 9/11, 3 separate buildings. Then FEMA has given 5 different reasons Building 7 fell, and they have to always go back and say, okay, that wasn't true. Oh, a fuel oil tank blew up. They say, well, no, that's not it. Oh, the North Tower fell on it. Well, that didn't happen with small fires. Didn't. Some of the dust and debris hit it. A few windows got broken. So lie. They don't have a reason why. These talking heads get up on television, on Fox and CNN, and I've seen them going, well, we have FEMA saying a tank did it, and we have FEMA saying it fell because the North Tower fell on it. No, a building actually had a tower fall on it, and that was Bankers Trust, and it burned, but nothing collapsed because that's never happened. It doesn't happen. It's science. Would you like to speak to that, Dr. Bowman?
Well, a lot of people have called me a conspiracy nut, including in my campaign, and so far they've been anonymous, but when my opponent joins them and says, you're a conspiracy nut because of your views on 9/11, I'm going to say, great, debate me on the issue. I am not into conspiracy theories, and I absolutely reject the most unbelievable conspiracy theory yet, which is the official one told us by our government.
I would also add to that if you look at the career of Abraham Lincoln, he got vilified as Spotty Lincoln because of his spot resolutions. He challenged the Polk administration to say, you say that the Mexicans attacked first to start the Mexican War. I want to know the spot. I want to know where. He didn't accept it. The favorite smoking gun that I would point to is the angel is next question. In other words, a death threat to Bush that comes in to Air Force One, Angel, accompanied by a cascade of top-level, top-secret code words from across the agencies, Pentagon, CIA, NSA, and so forth, indicating, well, that this is the moment when the rogue network speaks. And they are presenting an ultimatum to Bush, which is, in effect, with all these code words, we have the ability to launch nuclear missiles if we want to. We have those launch codes. You, Bush, will either start the war of civilizations in conventional form by talking about bin Laden, al-Qaeda, and Afghanistan, and invading Afghanistan, or we can launch it in nuclear form anytime we want. We can blow up Baghdad or Damascus or Tehran or any of these places.
Webster, I think you need to give a little bit of backstory on Angel.
Well, Angel is the code word for Air Force One, and this is a threat. It was very prominent in the first days. It's generally forgotten. Most books don't talk about it. And again, I regard it as crucial because this is the moment when the invisible government speaks. It's the principal political evidence of the day. Who did it? And this is all happening in a goldfish bowl. The Mossad, the French services, as well as the Russians, all saw this. They were all aware of what had happened, and it was a great brouhaha about this in the first couple of days. The other idea is that you're in the middle of 15-plus drills, the greatest density of military and terror drills in the history of the United States on that day. There are 4 or 5 drills that are designed to suppress air defense. They take fighter planes away from the Washington to New York corridor, send them to northern Canada, Alaska, Iceland, or indeed the Iraq no-fly zone.
And then there's also 4 hijacking drills going on and a Tripod 2 drill going on where they'd already pulled the command center out of Building 7 and out to the end of the pier.
So what they're doing is inserting fake radar blips onto screens, having planes flying around saying, I am hijacked. So we get up to 29 total aircraft reported hijacked on that day. Langley Air Force Base is down to 1/3 of their strength. Now, a loyal officer, whoever he was, would put 2 fighters over Washington if he had 2 and let the attackers come to them. The question there being the decapitation of the National Command Authority. But now let's get to Global Guardian. The thing that people have to see is on the morning of 9/11, before any planes were hijacked, the U.S. was in a full thermonuclear alert posture. B-1s and B-52s flying around loaded with hydrogen bombs, land-based missiles ready to go, submarines in launch position. General Ivashov of the Russian forces that I met and talked to was watching this from Moscow, and he said, first we saw an all-out military mobilization, a Cuban Missile Crisis-style deployment of all thermonuclear weapons, and then we saw the planes getting hijacked. The goal of this, obviously, is that in the middle of the day, there's the Bush-Putin phone call, where Bush delivers an ultimatum to Russia, saying, in effect, guess what, we're taking Afghanistan, we're taking Central Asia. We're taking Kyrgyzia, Kazakhstan, the 5 Central Asian republics. What if Putin, instead of being the very intelligent figure that he is, had said, the hell you are, we'll blow your head off? You then would have had thermonuclear escalation. This is one of the reasons I put a mushroom cloud on the cover of my book.
Webster, I would just add that particular general who you've been in public with giving speeches, he's on record saying it's clearly an inside job. And we know, this is a Newsweek magazine, that 2 days before 9/11, Bush had the full launch orders to attack Afghanistan on his desk, and that the troops had already massed in the months before, 44,000 U.S. troops, 18,000 British troops in Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, 2 carrier groups, all lined up, bombers lined up, everything ready. But they never heard of a plan to fly planes into a building. Professor Festzer, and then we're going to have a closing comments from all of you, and then we'll open it up for some questions.
Well, it's very difficult to go beyond what's already been covered. Let me offer an illustration of the media complicity here from a not surprising source, namely Fox News. Thursday night, I was invited on to Hannity and Combs ostensibly to discuss the results of investigations conducted by Scholars for 9/11 Truth. When I got on the show, however, I discovered that instead of wanting to address the rather crucial results, such as we have been discussing here, including that we had established that the Twin Towers were brought down by controlled demolition, which I said, including that we had Norman Minetta's testimony that Dick Cheney had given a stand-down order not to shoot the plane approaching the Pentagon, which we had, including that the FBI in recent weeks had affirmed it has no hard evidence connecting Osama bin Laden to 9/11, which I said. They were more interested in whether I had discussed any of these questions with my students than whether what I was telling them was true.
And they were calling them children. I thought when you're 20-something years old, you're not a child. But
I tell you, this is a perfect illustration. We must work to get the word out. We must reconstitute the Congress. We must reaffirm our existence as a free and democratic republic. The one great fear, the greatest fear we all share, that as the news tightens, as the truth emerges, as more and more people turn on this administration for the tyrants and liars and thieves that they are, that the threat of impeachment, trial, punishment, and incarceration is going to lead them to effect another fake terrorist attack, suspend the Constitution, and turn the American military on the American people. This, I am sorry to say, my friends, is what America, the crisis we face today. Do not look away.
And those preparations have been made. I mean, even former Supreme Court justices have gone on record saying a dictatorship is being set up. Bob Woodward, a few months ago in San Antonio, gave a speech. It was in the San Antonio Express News, saying that we're going into a dictatorship. We're in great danger. I mean, serious mainstream people are seeing this. They're openly saying, we want to get rid of posse comitatus. We're going to have to put troops on the streets. We're going to have to search you. But the borders are going to stay wide open. Don't worry. We've got to now have closing comments. But Dr. Bob Bowman, you were going to say one thing quickly before we did that?
Yes, I'm working with people high up in the U.S. military to get them to remember the Nuremberg principles, that we in the military not only have the right but the duty to refuse an illegal order. And if the civilian authority comes down to them to nuke Iran, they should not only refuse that order, but arrest whoever gave it as a war criminal.
I would just add that we've now seen 8 top generals. We've now seen 8 top generals go public and say, quote, this is crazy, this is wrong, this is a fraud. So there are more and more people at high levels in government and out of government that are speaking out. And that's good, because this is a time for courage. And I want to thank all of you who've been here with your incredible courage. And before we line up to take questions after this final statement, we're going to talk to Dylan Avery and Jason Burmis. We're also going to let Barry Zwicker have a quick comment, and also Jimmy Walter, who's here, have been part of the presentations here in the last day. But quickly, gentlemen, because we're running low on time, we've got exactly 20 minutes left here. C-SPAN has expanded a little bit. But a closing comment from each of you, please.
Well, we've heard several nudges to study 9/11, and I hope those who are watching this on C-SPAN will say that perhaps this is your time to get on the internet or get a DVD. That friend of yours who's trying to talk to you about 9/11, get some more information. Find out for yourself. The information is there. Quick story, professor, young, bright physics professor at my university, stopped me in the hall just the other day. He said, I know you've got this sample. What have you found in it? And I said, well, it's mostly iron. He said, it's not aluminum from the plane. Okay, now what else did you find in there? I said, well, there's some aluminum because of the nature of it, but not much. I said, well, we also found in there not much chromium at all. He said, oh, well, then it's not the structural steel, not just the structural steel that's melted. I said, you're right there. What else did you find in there? We found sulfur. And this stumped him, you know. well, what's the sulfur for? So I explained real quickly, sulfur makes the thermate cut more rapidly through structural steel. And he said, oh, of course, that would just make a eutectic. It's going to cut right through that steel. Very bright young physicist. And then he said, it's exciting that your research is coming together and its answers are... And then he stopped and he said, but on the other hand, it's very sad for our country. And it is. But we're not done. We still have a constitution. We still have remedies, and we can keep that if we can work together.
And we're fighting for this country. Bob Bowman, final statement.
First, a scary thought for you. Can you imagine what would have happened if George W. Bush had been president during the Cuban Missile Crisis? And then finally, I'd really like, because there's much more than we can say today, go to Bowman2006.com, my campaign website, Bowman2006.com, and take a look and read all the stuff there. And I'll tell you, if just you people, I know you've paid a lot of money to come to this conference, and it's worth it. If you write a check for $100 and send it to Bowman for Congress, I'm going to be a shoo-in, and I'll represent you, and I'll get the truth out. Thank you.
Thank you. Webster Tarpley?
I would try to sum up by saying we've got two intersecting processes. On the one side, the dams are breaking, the worm is turning, the myth is collapsing, people are throwing off this reign of terror, this brainwashing that was done around these events. On the other side, everything is now in place for the attack on Iran. It's likely to be a nuclear attack. And they're waiting only for the outside event. Now, Franklin D. Roosevelt told us the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. The Bush administration says, in effect, be afraid all the time. This has to be rejected. There are, however, 35 to 40% of the population of this country who support Bush based on the fact that they're scared out of their wits. And they're beyond reason on most issues. They believe that the attacks came from bin Laden and the cave. We have to show them the attacks were war provocations, cynically planned inside U.S. government offices from the bowels of the CIA, the National Security Agency, and the Pentagon and the rest of the intelligence
Webster Tarpley, thank you so much. Jim Festzer, we got to go quick.
This man poses as the security president, but he doesn't act like it. He has defunded now New York City and Washington, D.C. to the tune of at least 40% of what they should have to guard against terrorist acts. He's brought in the Dubai Ports Authority to control our ports, which is absurd if what he's been telling us the last 5 years is true. And now he is creating a network of highways from Mexico to Canada, which I've only just discovered, that are going to completely transform the character of the United States of America, and I've yet to hear a word of public discussion or debate about it. National security has three foundations. One is economic security. This man has bankrupted the nation. We're up to $9 trillion in debt and growing. The second is military strength. The war in Iraq is sapping our military. General after general says the National Guard is all but broken. The military cannot sustain it. And the third is our moral standing. He has taken this nation from the most admired and respected to the most reviled and despised. That was our greatest source of security in our past. He has turned Iraq into a huge terrorist state. I say to you, the claim that George Bush is the security president is nothing but a cruel joke.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much. Just in my closing remarks here before we take some questions and some comments, if you want to learn more about 9/11 and other false flag terror events, visit Infowars.com or PrisonPlanet.com or JonesReport.com. And I again want to thank all the presenters that have been here, the presenters that are coming up later today, and all of you for coming out. Thank you so much.